Namaskar. Welcome to this episode of What Does This Data Say? Today I am going to talk about a very difficult subject, that is the delimitation of Jammu and Kashmir. Now many of you have been writing to me to do such an episode, and I have been collecting data for quite some time on this subject. But the issue has been that whenever you want to find data regarding J&K, it is so much scattered around and it is not at one place that it's very time consuming to get the right data. Even for instance, the delimitation report of Government of India 2022 has been put under the e-gazette of NIC, and even if you search, that report doesn't pop up. Another point is that I thought I will try to do this full episode in half an hour, but when I started getting the data, it is enormous, and there was no point in just telling you the end result of the delimitation. For that, there are many channels on YouTube or on the social media where you will find that information. I wanted to do a comprehensive job about why delimitation became so necessary. So for that, I thought I should give you a background of the state so that you can then appreciate the processes which have happened in the last 5-6 years in that state. Everyone in India has an opinion about J&K, whether they come from that state or not. I can at least be safe in that respect that I can claim that I am from Jammu and Kashmir. I spent my entire childhood in that state, and even after that I have connections since my wife comes from that state. So I think I am better qualified to do this episode than many of the other channels which are carrying this information. So this topic about delimitation I'll be covering in 2 episodes. The first one, I will talk about the 75 years journey of Jammu and Kashmir. This will help you appreciate the data which I will present later as part of the delimitation process. Second part I will do next week, where this question we will all try to answer: was delimitation in J&K necessary? Now as usual, I'll only be presenting the data, no views or opinions from my side. All that I leave it to you guys to figure out what is good, what is bad, what should have happened or what should not have happened. Now this 75 years of journey of the state of Jammu and Kashmir, I will be dividing it into logical sections. The first one I'm going to deal with which is called the formative years of the state, is the period from 1947 to 1951. 1947 the state acceded to India, and in 1951 it had its first election. The period was when Sheikh Abdullah was totally in control of the state. He was then a young Kashmiri leader who was fighting against the royalty to make an independent nation. On 26th October 1947, the Maharaja of Jammu and Kashmir, Hari Singh, signed the instrument of accession to India, and from that day J&K became a part of the dominion of India. Now this came as a big shock to Pakistan, which was all through expecting that Jammu and Kashmir will be joining Pakistan. They sent in their forces immediately thereafter in the northern parts of Kashmir to capture the territory by force, of course with the connivance of the British Army. The story of Captain William Brown is well known, that how his treachery against the Maharaja of J&K, Hari Singh, which led to him handing over Gilgit-Baltistan over to Pakistan. Now in the hurry, there had to be someone to control J&K. Though the terms of the Maharaja with Sheikh Abdullah were not very good, the Maharaja appointed Sheikh Abdullah as head of the emergency administration. Following the ceasefire declared on January 1st, 1948, Sheikh Abdullah was declared the first Prime Minister of the state of Jammu and Kashmir on 5th March 1948. Once he became the Prime Minister, Now, there were two tasks which he took up as an immediate action plan. The first was to write the constitution of the state, for which a constituent assembly was needed. So on 27th October 1950, he declared that a constituent assembly will be convened, for which the elections will be held shortly. These elections were finally held in 1951. Now, for an election, one needs to know how many seats there will be. Sheikh Abdullah and his government took a very ad hoc decision that there will be 100 seats in the state. He allotted 25 seats to the Pak occupied Kashmir area and the remaining 75, which was split as 43 seats to Kashmir, 2 to Ladakh and 30 to the Jammu region. There was no census done, and I am not sure if at that time the government even knew what was the population of the states, because the influx of people on either side of the border was still continuing. The 1951 election was a highly irregular one. The elections were conducted by the state's election and franchise commissioner. All 43 seats allotted to Kashmir went to the National Conference candidates, who were elected unopposed a week before the date of the elections. In Jammu, 13 candidates belonging to the Jammu Praja Parishad had their nominations rejected. Praja Parishad then boycotted the election, alleging the government's illegal practices and official interference. Two independent candidates dropped out at the last moment, giving a clean sweep to the National Conference. So the result was all 75 seats went to the National Conference. Now I come to the second period, that is the period from 1953 to 1962. One may have expected that Sheikh Abdullah, being such a powerful leader, he would have continued in being the Prime Minister of the state for many more years to come. But that really was not to be. Sheikh Abdullah was dismissed as the Prime Minister of J&K in August 1953. He was immediately arrested and later jailed for a period of 11 years, and he was accused of conspiracy against the state in the infamous Kashmir conspiracy case. Now, this case, you can read about it on the net, there is a lot of information, but the charges was that he was plotting against the government of India and was supporting a plebiscite in J&K. That was not liked by the powers in New Delhi, and Karan Singh therefore dismissed him. But another reason, which was really the actual reason, was that the people of Jammu did not like the way the seats were allotted to Jammu area. They felt cheated by Sheikh Abdullah. Now, Bakshi Ghulam Muhammad from the National Conference was then appointed as the Prime Minister of the state. Now, he ruled the states for the next 9 years to come. Bakshi Ghulam Muhammad was a founder member of the National Conference and a close confidant of Sheikh Abdullah. Now, during his period, two major things happened. First is the Constitution of J&K was released on 26 January 1957. So then thereafter the Constituent Assembly was renamed as the Legislative Assembly. And secondly, the Jammu and Kashmir Representation of People's Act also came into effect. Now, this is the act under which the state elections have been conducted till it was repealed in the year 2019. And this also talks of how the delimitation of the state would happen. In 57 and 62, there were two elections, and both these elections were won by the National Conference under the leadership of Bakshi Ghulam Muhammad. All through this period, Sheikh Abdullah was in jail. In both these elections, National Conference won hands down. In 57, it got 68 seats. In 62, it got 70, and a few seats were shared by the Praja Parishad of the Jammu region. Having won 2 elections, as they say, power went into the head of Bakshi Ghulam Muhammad. He started making some noises which did not go well with New Delhi. Delhi forced him to resign and step down from the Prime Ministership on 12th August 1963 without completing the second term in office. Now I'll come to the third period, which is starting from 1963 and going up to 1972, the next 9 years. Till now, for the first 15 years, National Conference had been in power. Now this period, which I am showing here, is the time when National Conference lost the power and Indian National Congress stepped in. It was only for a very brief period in 1963 when Khwaja Shamsuddin became a Prime Minister for less than a year, but unfortunately during that period a religious relic from Srinagar's Hazrat Bal Mosque was stolen. The public outcry was so huge against the government that Khwaja Shamsuddin had to step down in February 1964. At that time, Ghulam Muhammad Sadiq, who was till then in National Conference, with a group of MLAs, left the party and joined the Congress party. So without any re-election, Ghulam Muhammad Sadiq became the Chief Minister. Not only that, he also forced the National Conference to dissolve itself and got it merged with the Indian National Congress. That did not go well with a few people in National Conference like Bakshi Ghulam Muhammad, who refused to toe that line, and they formed a rebel National Conference which fought the election in 1967. Another important thing which Ghulam Muhammad Sadiq did is he stopped calling himself the Prime Minister and renamed that post as Chief Minister. After the 67 election, Ghulam Muhammad Sadiq was again reappointed the Chief Minister. He continued on that post till his death on 12th December 1971. Thereafter, another congressman, Syed Mir Qasim, was appointed the Chief Minister. Since the Congress and the National Conference had merged, both these elections, the Congress had won with a comfortable majority. However, the Jammu region, which earlier used to have the Praja Parishad, was merged into Bharatiya Jansangh at that time, and they started to fight from the Jammu area. While the Congress was ruling the state, Nehru tried to patch up again with Sheikh Abdullah. He thought of using Sheikh Abdullah to patch up his relationships with Pakistan. He got Sheikh Abdullah released from prison and asked him to go to Pakistan to invite Ayub Khan to come to India to settle the Kashmir issue. Sheikh Abdullah went to Pakistan, but while he was there, Nehru died, which was a setback to those talks. Sheikh Abdullah returned back to India along with Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, they both attended Nehru's funeral ceremonies. But that was a very brief period. When Lal Bahadur Shastri came into power, he again put Sheikh Abdullah behind bars. Now the third period I'll talk of is from 1973 to 1983, which I call the second terms of the Abdullahs. Sheikh Abdullah was brought out of exile by Indira Gandhi when she signed an accord with him in 1974. In return, he agreed to give up his demand for a plebiscite and return to normal politics in the state. He was brought back and again made the Chief Minister in 1975. Sheikh Abdullah became a second time Chief Minister on 25th February 1975. Syed Mir Qasim resigned and gave way to him. Now note that all this again happened without any re-election. Congress has won the election, but a National Conference leader is made the Chief Minister. Similar to what happened earlier when National Conference had won the election and Congress Chief Minister came in. So funny things have happened in this state. Now there were again two elections in this term. The first one in 77 which was won by the rejuvenated National Conference, and then again in 1983. In between, Sheikh Abdullah died on 8 September 1982 and his son Farooq Abdullah took over as Chief Minister. After Sheikh Abdullah's return, National Conference parted ways again with the Indian National Congress. They fought elections separately. The 77 election was probably the first election which was held under the Morarji Desai government, who openly declared that anyone who would attempt to pursue some form of rigging would be severely punished. It was the first election in the state where there were no malpractices reported. Now, by 1983, the two parties had fallen apart. Indira Gandhi took it upon herself to campaign for the Congress. During the campaign, she raised the Muslim bogey, saying that Farooq Abdullah has again opened the chapter for the Muslims on the Pakistan occupied Kashmir to come back and resettle within the state. Her campaign paid dividends. In 83, the Congress won 27 seats, the National Conference 47. The Congress in the previous election had won only 11 seats. The fourth period now I'll talk of is 1984 to 1996. This period is the most turbulent period in the history of the state of Jammu and Kashmir. In 1983, Farooq Abdullah had won the election, but the Congress engineered the defection of Ghulam Muhammad Shah, who was the brother-in-law of Farooq Abdullah, along with 12 members into the Congress, and thereby toppled the Farooq Abdullah government. Ghulam Muhammad Shah became the chief minister, but not for very long. There were communal riots in Anantnag, and looking at that, the governor at that time, Jagmohan, dismissed that government. Now, it's strange that Farooq Abdullah goes out of power and communal riots start in the valley. Now, I won't talk too much about this period because this is the period when militancy peaked in the valley. There was governor's rule applied in the state, hardly there was any popular government, and all the parties put together in the valley was supporting the militants in one form or the other. So it was a dark period in the history of this state. There was one election only held during this period, which the two major parties, the National Conference and the Congress, had formed a cartel and they shared the seats among them. The 1987 election was won by National Conference. Farooq Abdullah became the chief minister, but not for very long. He was dismissed and governor's rule continued for a very long time. This is also the time when Kashmiri Pandit Hindus started leaving the valley. The next period I will talk of is 1996 to 2005. This is the period when there were all sorts of government in the center, starting from the Janata Dal to the BJP and then the Congress. This was probably the most stable period of the state. There were two elections, a 96 election and 2002. The 96 election was won by National Conference and Farooq Abdullah became the chief minister and completed his full term. The 2002 election was won by Mufti Muhammad Saeed, but he fell short of a majority and was supported by the Congress. So Mufti Muhammad Saeed and Ghulam Nabi Azad shared the chief ministership for a 3-year term each. By 2002, the National Conference had lost its influence in the valley and PDP had come up as an alternative force. And finally, I come to the last period, which is from 2008 till 2016. By 2008, there were some issues between the PDP and the Congress, so they parted ways and again National Conference won the election. Umar Abdullah became the chief minister as Farooq Abdullah wanted someone young to lead the state. After the election, PDP had approached the Congress to get support, but at that time Manmohan Singh declined and said that we should only support the largest party and honor the mandate of the people. So with Congress support, the National Conference came to power. Just before the 2014 elections, National Conference and the Congress had again parted ways. The 2014 election saw the rise of the BJP. It captured all the seats in the Jammu region. Along with PDP, they formed the government. Mufti Muhammad Saeed became the chief minister, and he continued in that post till his death on 7th January 2016. Thereafter, his daughter Mehbooba Mufti became the Chief Minister of J&K. While Mehbooba Mufti was in power, supported by the BJP, the governor of J&K issued a proclamation on 20th June 2018 under Section 92 of the Constitution of J&K with the concurrence of the President of India, thereby assuming to himself the functions of the government and legislature of the state and making some incidental and consequential provision. The State Assembly, initially kept in suspended animation, was dissolved by the Governor on 21/11/2018. Now thereafter, the process of abrogation of Article 370 started, and then as new elections had to be called for the newly formed Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir, delimitation became very necessary. All through the last 75 years, the state, which started with ad hoc seats of 100 seats, 25 to Pak occupied Kashmir, 75 to this region, hardly made any changes. Only 7 or 8 seats were added to the state in these 25 years, and that too without any basis, without any census, and without taking the population into account. So I hope you get a gist of the turbulent history of J&K. If there has to be a crown for the most messed up state of India, I think Jammu and Kashmir will get that title. There cannot be a more messed up state anywhere. The people of J&K have been suffering for the last 75 years, and I know that state very well, and it has been left out from development from the rest of the country. So next week I will continue on the same subject, and that's when I will talk about the delimitation. Till then, namaskar and see you again next week.